Hi, everybody, and welcome to we're getting almost not done with class here. We're towards the end. We're going to cover this week chapters 17 and 18. I'm sorry, 16 and 17. We're going to talk about banking and understand the role of money. And we're also going to look at managing business finances, which is a little bit of a misnomer, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Your work last week was great on giving discussion points on how you perceive that information technology is going to affect you. This is just a little side note to it. I hired fairly high level managers, and one of the important tests that they had to pass was how they went about assessing technology and whether we should invest in technology or not, because I put them in charge of doing that. And of course, it was really, really important that they looked at it in a very sound and uh, effective way, I guess. So I asked a lot of questions in interviews about that because it's a real skill. It's a real a valuable skill because you're going to be asked in your future to assess technology and decide whether it's something you want to adopt or not, and that's a very important decision to make. So I was very encouraged by what you gave me. So this week we're going to talk about understanding money and the role of banking, and we're going to look at finances. Now, this chapter in the book about finances is not what I would consider to be how finance is viewed from an academic standpoint. It's just sort of an overview of how finances work, um, and almost like how you would think about it as a personal investor. So um, it covers a lot of ground in a little space, and I understand it's just scratching the surface. But I teach business finance, and I can tell you it's not exactly the same thing. So just take that for what it's worth. It's still a worthwhile thing to read through and understand. But finance is a very important part of business. And the higher up the food chain you go in management, the more important it is that you really understand finance. And I tell my finance students this. Um, Truth is when I think about all the classes I took and all the education I had, the one textbook I go back to on a regular basis is my financial textbooks from my first two finance classes. I look at them all the time because I have to understand, okay, what impact are the decisions I'm suggesting a company make have on their finances, and it's a very important way to look at it. So finance is the universal language of business, and um, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I sit on I should say used to sit on the board of a business incubator, which is a place where people come and develop their business ideas and get help and understanding about it and put together business plans. And that was my role would have been to help them do that. And the bottom line is this: is when I would have people come to me with like a biotechnology solution that meant absolutely nothing to me. They could explain it and say like I kind of get it. I understand. I'm in trouble sizing up the market and all that, but they talked about finances and then all of a sudden put it onto common terms with what anybody else is talking about in their business plans. So finance is an important topic to learn about, and I fully encourage you if you find it interesting to learn more about it. And banking is also a very important thing, and particularly in relationship to our economy. And so there's lots of things to learn there. So chapter 16 and 17 are what we're going to cover this week. Now let's go to D12 so we can take a look at some of what we have in there. Okay, so let me open up the banking one. And there's several videos here that are really interesting to look at. If you're interested in Bitcoin or cyber currency, kind of a rough subject these days, but it's here to stay. It's going to be around. I don't see it going away. So if you want to learn a little bit more about it, I put some videos out there for it in terms of exactly how it works, in case you don't really understand it. And and then then we are going to talk about a couple other things. By the way, this Frontline show is awesome. It's a great show. Frontline is a series that's on PBS, and it talks about the power of the Fed and how it's a pretty it's a pretty awesome look at things. So I would suggest that video just out of sheer interest in terms of how the Federal Reserve works. And a couple of basic things. By the way, the bank run at It's a Wonderful Life, just because it's one of my favorite movies, I have to put it in there. So, so it's just when we talk about bank runs, you'll understand what that means if you once you read through the chapter. But what is important is that we talk about what happened back in 2008, which you say like, well, that's a long time ago. What difference does that make? It was a really important thing that happened then. Not the fact that we had a collapse of our banking system and ultimately a collapse of our economy, but it also pointed out the role of the government within banking. And we talk about and by the way, if everybody knows the musical Hamilton, I'm not that familiar with it myself in terms of the music and all that, but Alexander Hamilton was a huge proponent of centralized banking. So, um, and our founding fathers dealt with this issue in terms of what a centralized bank should look like. So, this is a really interesting discussion about the role of the government in banking. We tried to leave those things kind of separate. Not surprisingly, a centralized bank are very common in Europe, and were controlled by the monarchies at the time of the founding of our country. But it's really important to point out that there were many people who thought, as part of a very important part of our democracy, that we left a centralized bank out of the equation. And so a lot of arguing went back and forth. And if you ever really want to read more about that, read the Federalist Papers. It's one of the most important series of documents, that basically letters that help define what our country is today. So then you're going to watch so the TARP funds commercial it's optional. It's kind of funny. It's a funny play on what were popular commercials at the time for American Express. So just take a look at that. But anyway, the important one is to watch Should Government Bail Out Big Banks? That it's produced by a libertarian, very conservative organization, the Prager Institute, which kind of helps you understand their point of view as what they put out there in the video. But it's an interesting point of view, and it's one that we should consider, whether or not the government should be involved with bailing out banks. And that's what our discussion post is going to be about. But there's a lot attached to it, so please read through the chapter and do all that before you put your discussion post out there. All right. Okay, so that's the chapter on banking. By the way, a tricky little concept in there is the banking multiplier, and if you have any questions about that, I believe I have a video out there for that as well. But take the time to really understand that. It's a really important part of what banking is about. So how banks create money, basically. Okay. All right. So that's banking. Now the second thing we're going to cover is finance. So let me get to that chapter. And chapter 17, like I said, we're coming to the end. I don't really have anything out there other than reading through the chapter. If there's anything more that you want to discuss about finance or wanted to learn about finance, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Like I say, I teach finance classes here at Oakton, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Okay, so good luck with it. We have our discussion post, and read through and do your chapter quizzes, and we'll be rolling into the final week of the class. Okay, so good luck, and we'll talk to you in a bit.